All right, first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about real property versus personal property. Again, this is a common law content that we're dealing with what's called, and this is the scientific term, fructus industrials versus fructus naturals. Okay, those are the scientific words. You may see those terminologies on the state exam, you may not. What that means, industrials and naturals, is for the industrials, we're talking about crops like wheat, corn. These are big fields, commercial farmers. Okay, and so basically, how this works, especially in Louisiana, for you, La Quinta, in Louisiana, in the mid part of the state, these farmers will lease this property out from the owner of the land, and then they'll plant their crop as a tenant. They're called tenant farmers. Okay, now it is considered personal property. Okay, don't confuse this with perennials or fructus naturals. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But when you see the word industrials, we're talking about personal property. We're talking about industry. We're talking about the farming industry. So, and the reason it makes them personal property is because during the gestation cycle, they grow. Yes, it would seem like it's real property because they're permanently in the ground, but because they're going to be harvested, just like you see in the picture here, that big combine is harvesting this wheat field, and this individual in this combine harvesting this wheat field may be a tenant farmer. Doesn't own the land, owns the crop. So it's considered personal property. Okay, personal property. Could be a field of corn, sugarcane, and basically it's harvested annually. And because it's picked or harvested and comes out of the ground while it's growing, listen to me, it is considered personal property. Okay. Now, don't confuse this with the term fructus naturals or what's called perennials. Okay. This is landscape. This is coming up on someone's home, and you see the azaleas. You may see some white cottonwood trees with the pretty white blossoms. The grass, you can see in the backdrop here, all the big pine trees. Those are actually permanent to the land, and they're not harvested, but they're going to be there year in and year out for years to come. Okay, that is considered real property. Okay, that's considered real property. So remember, industrials. Okay, fructus industrials, which means we're talking about crops that are growing. Okay, crops that are growing. Implements is another term. Crops that are growing that will be harvested, which means they're coming out of the ground, that's considered personal property, versus fructus naturals or perennials are permanent to the ground. They're going to be real property. Okay, so you want to know the difference when it comes to crops and perennials. Fructus industrials or implements, and perennials or fructus naturals. Okay, personal property, real property. All right, so let's look at a couple of questions you may see on the state exam. What is another term for implements? What do you think? Another term for implements. Now remember, when we talked about implements, we're talking about those crops that were harvested is considered personal property. And we're talking about fructus industrials and implements. Remember, perennials, which are permanent, those are fructus naturals. Okay, so we're looking at answer A. Those are considered fructus industrials. Okay, implements go with industrials. Perennials go with naturals. Okay, very good. All right, here's another question you may see. Which of the following below best represents fructus naturals? What do you think? All right, couple of mixed answers here. Let's go back and review real quick. When we say fructus naturals, remember we're talking about permanent. Palm trees, crepe myrtles. Here in the picture, we see all the flowers in bloom, the azaleas and the shrubs, the grass, the trees in the backyard. That's all permanent, naturals, okay? Perennials. They're not harvested. When we look at crops, because they're going to be harvested, is considered personal property, industrials, or implements, okay? Implements. Now, the question is, which of the following below represent fructus naturalis? So you have to look at this and ask yourself, you're at the test center and you're going to ask yourself, what is fructus naturalis? Okay, those are perennials, permanent, real property. So I'm not looking for something I can harvest. I'm looking for something permanent. Now, saying that, what would be your best selection now? Very good. Excellent. Right? Cornfield, wheat field, those are harvested crops. That's not considered fructus naturalis, but they're industrials. So those two aren't the right answer, which makes D not the right answer. And so we're looking at a rose garden, something that's permanent and it's going to be there year round. Okay? Very good. So you want to know those. Listen, it's very important that you understand the difference because it can get confusing a little bit, but always keep the industrials or implements as something that can be harvested. And then the perennials or naturals is something that's going to be permanent, like landscape. Okay? All right. Let's continue on and talk about real property versus personal property. Now, remember, real property, here's a basic definition, right? Cannot move this property. In other words, real property you can't move. For example, we talked about the fructus naturalis of the perennials like a tree. You saw the trees in the background of that house. You can't go and move a pine tree. Okay, that can't be done. Neither can you move a house. That's considered real property. Okay. Personal property, on the other hand, can be moved. If I go into a house and there's a pool table, I can load it up on a truck. A refrigerator can unplug it and roll it out the door. Okay. It's not considered permanent to the property itself. So it's considered personal property. We're going to talk a little bit more about transferring real property versus personal property a little bit later. Now, for the state exam, listen to me carefully. You want to know these three components. It's made up of, real estate is made up of land, improvements. Okay, that word improvement is used on the state exam, but what that means is improvement of the land. Think about that. Think about it in terms of that. If I've got raw land and I want to improve the land, I'm going to put a house on it. I'm going to put a fence, maybe a barn. Okay. So hence I'm improving the land. That's why they call them improvements. Okay. So it starts out with raw land. Then you got the improvements. Okay. Now, when I take land plus real estate, or excuse me, land plus improvements, which is any improvement, and this includes ownership rights, that's what gives me the definition for real estate. Okay. So land is real property. Improvement is real property, and then the land plus the improvement, combination of both of them, with the ownership is considered real property. So I got a nice little picture here. This was actually a project I had for my client, sold them the land up at the top left, and then brokered the contractor to build the house for them. Okay, so oversaw and managed the building process. And then, of course, the end result, that's not the house, but I just found something that looked as close as possible. But my whole point of this slide is there's your raw land. Okay. Notice all the perennials that are on that land right now. Those are fructus naturalis. Those are trees. You can't move it. That's all considered real property along with the dirt. Okay. Now, you add the improvement. There's the house. That raw land, let's say, was purchased for $100,000. And then the home was built. Now the whole real estate itself, land plus the improvement, the whole real estate may be worth $650,000. So there's another hint from an economic standpoint. The actual home improves the raw land in value and physical characteristic. Okay. So you got land, which is the raw land and all the natural components with it. Those are what we refer to as perennials or fructus naturalis. And then you got the improvement, which is the building itself. Here it's a 2-story house. And then you take both of those and add them together. And at the bottom, you see you got real estate. Okay. So you want to dissect, separate these components as land, improvement, together, it's real estate. Okay. And also that real estate is included with the bundle of rights as far as ownership goes. Okay.
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.
All right, let's answer this question. Physical land, its attachments, and its bundle of rights is known as what? What do you think? Physical land, its attachments, that's talking about the improvements, and its bundle of rights is known as what? Remember, we said land plus the improvements equals what? Real estate. Remember, when you go back here, land plus the improvement or the attachments gives you real estate. Okay. So we're looking at answer B. Bravo. Okay. Land plus the improvements gives you real estate. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about ownership and water rights. Okay. Water rights. This is a really, really popular area. I've got two questions I'm going to include on this section right here. Water rights is a very important discussion, and you got to know this when you get to the state exam because they got an assortment of questions they can ask when it comes to water rights. Two terms under A and B you want to know for the state exam. One's called riparian rights. The other one is littoral rights. And it's kind of an easy memory aid when you're looking at this because riparian, I like to use the word R or R. You know, if you pronounce the word R, it stands for R, right? Riparian, R. Well, that's going to be associated with water rights that is running water, like rivers, okay, streams, etc. So we're talking about riparian R, running water R, rivers, okay? Littoral, on the other hand, is L, littoral, la, lakes, large bodies of water. These are bodies of water that don't flow, okay? So littoral deals with ownership rights. And you're talking about ownership rights, which is waterfront, okay? If you're on a river, for example, you've got waterfront rights to the river. Those are called riparian rights. And each state has their revised statute on how the property owner owns either to the center of the river or stream or to the bank. It depends if it's navigable or non-navigable. In other words, boat traffic, no boat traffic, okay? So riparian, this is waterfront to a river, river, riparian. Littoral, this is waterfront if you got beachside property or you're on a lake, okay? That's called littoral, large bodies of water. So it's kind of, you can develop a nice memory aid, develop a system to kind of correlate those two words. But you want to know those two words when it comes to water rights and ownership for the state exam. Now, the other thing you want to know is how land is gained and lost. How land is gained and lost, okay? Another big section. Again, you have to go back and you got to look at yourself. Do I have riparian rights or littoral rights, depending on what kind of body of water I have waterfront access to or waterfront ownership? But it doesn't matter if it's lake or river. What we're looking at here is how land is gained and lost to waterfront property, okay? Now, the first one is called accretion, okay? Now, the little memory aid I like to do and use for the state exam, and if I see a question like this, is I like to reference it as A credit. If you give somebody a credit, they're in the plus, right? If I credit you with $100, I'm giving you $100. I'm not going to debit. I'm going to give you. So a credit, accretion. Okay. I like to kind of associate it with a credit of what? Sand and silt that forms land. So if you look at the picture at the top right, you see the river. See how dirty that water is? Well, the silt and the sand that's in that water is what makes it dirty. It is not soluble. It doesn't go in the solution. In other words, if I take a glass and I pour sand and silt in it and stir it up, it's going to be muddy. It'll stain the water, but it'll be muddy. But then because it's not soluble and it's called inert, inert means it's not soluble. If I stop stirring that glass, all that sediment is going to fall out to the bottom of the glass. Okay. And it's going to form a thickness of silt and dirt at the bottom of the silt and sand at the bottom of the glass. That's what happens with the rivers that have the silt and sand in it over time. Now, it's not something we can see with the naked eye. This is over time, like decades and decades and decades. But over time, these bodies of water, they will drop out their sand and silt, and it forms land. The very essence of that sand and silt falling out is a credit to the land it's formed. Now, the land it forms is called the alluvion, which is number 3. That is the land formed due to accretion or a credit of the sand and silt falling out of the water. It forms the alluvion. If you look at the top picture, you can see the inside of that river. You can still see the dirty water. That's where over time that little beachfront was formed on the inside of the turn. Okay, that's called alluvion. That's what's formed over time. Okay, also the middle picture, you can see on the inside of the middle picture, that bank was formed over time through accretion or the deposit of silt that formed the alluvion. The alluvion is the actual land that it formed. Okay, erosion is pretty simple. Everybody has an understanding of what erosion is. It's just a taking away of the bank. And then you want to see the term reliction at the bottom. Reliction is nothing more than a dry spell, for example, or they open up a dam to lower the water. As water drops from none other source than maybe a dry spell, or they open a dam to a lake, and the water begins to drop, it forms land called the reliction. Again, if you got waterfront property, okay, and that water drops and land becomes exposed, then the property owner gains access to the reliction, or that land is formed or is exposed from the dropping of the water. And then avulsion. Avulsion is a sudden tearing away of land. For those who are in Florida and Louisiana and the other southern states, you may have witnessed and experienced hurricanes over the years, and the marshlands and the delta lands. A lot of those islands, those barrier islands, get moved and pushed away. This is called avulsion. Don't confuse that with alluvion. Alluvion is the land that's formed because of accretion or the falling out. A credit of silt and sand forms the alluvion. Avulsion is the sudden tearing away due to winds, other big natural acts. Okay. So you want to know riparian, you want to know littoral, and then how land is gained and lost. Have a good understanding of this because you're going to see maybe 1 or 2 questions definitely dealing with this. So I got 2 questions with this section. Here we go. Question number 1. Which is not an example of avulsion? So you got to first define what avulsion is. And then you go through and pick the one that's not an example. All right. Excellent. Excellent, y'all. That's beautiful. Perfect. So again, I look at this question. The first thing I do, I try to answer the question before looking at my answer selection. That's just my technique. It works for me. So if I read the question, I say, which of the following is not an example of avulsion? So I sit back and I'm at the test center now, and I'm not talking out loud, but I'm thinking under my breath, avulsion. Okay, that's we're talking about land, how land is gained and lost, and I'm thinking this out. Okay, I know about erosion, I know about accretion, alluvion, reliction. Avulsion is natural disasters, hurricanes, high winds that move. So I'm looking for something dealing with high winds. I got three answers that are examples of catastrophes in that. One of them is not going to fit that. And then I'll go through my answer selection. After a storm, boom, I know that's one. During a drought, the lake dries up. And I say to myself, nope, that's reliction. Okay. Flash flood, boom. Hillside is torn away, earthquake, boom. All natural disaster. Land is suddenly torn away through these natural disasters, but a lake that's dried up is reliction. So answer B. And you guys got that. That's kind of an example how I go through these test questions. It builds in continuity, and it doesn't get me pumping the brakes, going fast, slowing down, going fast. I kind of have a consistency. If I learned how to answer questions before I look at my answers, I'm going to be consistent throughout the test, and it brings me through a nice pace, comfortable pace through the test. Okay, it's just a technique I use. Take it for what it's worth. All right, answer B. Very good. All right, here's the next question. Over the last several years, the tide has been depositing silt onto the property along a coastal inlet, increasing the size of the property. This is an example of good. Excellent. Good job. So when I read this question, I read it, and again, I'm looking at when I read it, I'm looking at several years. The tide has been depositing silt. Right there, keywords. Boom. Depositing silt onto the property. So if I'm depositing silt, I look at that and that rings a bell called a credit, right? And I associate that a credit with the term accretion, right? So we're talking about answer A. Remember, how land is moved, gained and lost. Gained and lost. We can gain land and we can lose land. Here we're gaining land through the deposit of silt. Now, if the question would have said over the last several years, the tide had been depositing silt onto the property along the coastal inlet, which of the following below best describes the land that is formed? Okay. Now, the land that is formed is not accretion, but the land that is formed as a result of accretion is called alluvion. Okay. Be careful. Listen to me carefully. Be careful. Typically, they'll have them separated when it comes to answers. You won't see alluvion and accretion together, but you never know. Okay, these test writers can get real tricky sometimes. So you want to analyze a test question. The depositing of silt. There's your key words. Okay, if the question were to ask, "What's the land called because of this depositing silt?" That's called the alluvion. Okay, so make sure you characterize the test question and answer what they're asking for. Okay, so we're talking about answer A. Excellent. All right, let's move on and talk about ownership, estates, rights, and interests. This is a big section here. Okay, when it comes to ownership rights, estates, interest in the property. Now, the definition of the word estate in land is called the degree, quantity, and nature of interest someone has in property. Okay. So I'm going to give it to you in a big picture here, kind of a big umbrella. If I say the word estate and land, all I'm saying is, hey, listen, I've got a certain degree, I got a certain quantity, and I've got a certain nature of interest in property. Well, what is that interest, John? Well, I can own it, okay, which is called fee simple, right? Or freehold, that's ownership, or it can be leasehold, which is called rental, okay? Those are the two different types categorized estate and land. Now, we're going to talk about freehold estate in this section right here. When we talk about freehold estate, we're talking about a free man's holding. It's an old English term they used to use when you owned property. You actually had ownership rights to the property, okay? And that's what they call the free man's holdings, okay? Now, under the estate for land, when it comes to freehold estate or ownership, that's how I like to look at it. I've got what's called fee simple absolute, okay? And I've got another term called fee simple defeasible. Two different types of ownerships that you want to know for the state exam, okay? Let's look at fee simple absolute first. This is, and you want to know this, fee simple absolute is the highest and best recognized in the land of ownership, okay? It's the highest and best. You get the complete bundles of rights: disposition, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and control. Okay, those are the bundle of rights that come with fee simple absolute. Again, the highest and best ownership recognized in the land. I like to use the acronym Deep C. Deep C is a great acronym that covers disposition, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and control. So disposition means I can dispose of the property. Remember in your studies, when it comes to transfer of property, who is it called that transfers the deed? Can someone type that in? Who is that person called? In the transfer of property section in your studies, who is the individual? If I transfer my deed to you, what am I called? Somebody type that in. There you go. Good, LaQuinta. It's called the grantor. Okay. Who is it that receives the deed? What are they called? The grantee. Perfect, Lisa. Now, grantor, grantee. Now, listen to me carefully. The grantor, in this case, is going to have fee simple absolute, highest and best recognized. In other words, the grantor can dispose of that property under the common law of fee simple absolute, can dispose of the property however they want to. Sell it, donate it, gift it. They can, however they want to do that, they can dispose of that property. It's called disposition. Enjoyment, they get rights of ownership. In other words, they can bear the fruits off that land. And it's just not necessarily talking about farmland, but the fruits of what that land can bring. Could be rental property, could be farmland, agriculture that produces fruits. But anything that that land produces, the enjoyment for that owner, they receive. Exclusion, that's where they can make it private property. Okay. And in possession, they can make alterations to it. And in control is they can use the property however they want to, as long as they stay within legal rights. So fee simple absolute, highest and best, recognized by law. Deep C, great memory aid. You want to make note of that. Disposition, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and control. Have an idea, vision this, of what these terms mean when an owner has the complete bundle of rights under fee simple absolute. Okay. Now, if I'm at the top of a ladder, I've got fee simple absolute. If I take a couple of steps down and I come down to the middle of the ladder, I'm going to lose some bundle of rights, which brings me to fee simple defeasible. Okay. Fee simple defeasible is ownership. It is ownership, but it's subject to conditions. For example, if I've got a property in town, say it's in the close to a commercial zoning of commercial, but it's a residential property. and you get a special use permit, for example, to, I don't know, put an urgency care center or something for specific use or special use. You have to get it because it's zoned differently. You got to get a special use permit. And let's say I sell you that property, fee simple to feasible, and I put conditions on it that all you can do is serve the public as a, watch this, urgent care center. Okay. I've sold that. That's what's in the deed. There are subject conditions, conditions subject to the purchase, which means you've got ownership rights. You own it in perpetuity. You own it just like fee simple absolute, but you can only use it for urgent care reasons. Okay. If you violate that, if the grantee who owns it in perpetuity violates it and turns it into a restaurant or a coffee shop, then they're going to lose the property. Okay. Because they violated the conditions. Now, how it goes back to the owner is determined through fee simple determinable or defeasible fee. And basically the difference is one's going to court and the other one's not. Okay. So that's all going to be in the actual agreement and on the deed. Okay. So fee simple determinable or to determine is already been determined. It's already been predetermined, if you want to sort of look at that, as it's going to go back to the owner if those conditions are violated. The feasible fee is going to require court action. So fee simple absolute, highest and best. Do whatever you want with that property as long as you stay within the limits of the law. Fee simple defeasible, you have conditions. You still own it, but you have conditions that are subject. Okay. And if you change those and you violate those conditions that are set in place, you can lose the property. Okay. And then no fee simple determinable. There's no court action, and the feasible fee there is. Okay. All right. Here's the question associated with this. G inherits a plot of land from J. Stop. Listen to me carefully. Look up here. Don't read this question yet. Look here at me for a second. When you read these type of questions, you really got to go in segments. So the way I do this, follow me on this. G inherits a plot of land from J. So I'm going, okay, so G is given land, inherits land from J. 1 year later, G inherited land, sells half of the property to K. So now I've inherited land. I'm G. I got it from J, but I'm going to sell half of it to K. I'm going to sell half the land. Okay. 1 year later, K gives her half to A. Okay. So K has got a half and now it gives to A. Who sells the mineral rights? This series of events best represents the legal property of what? What do you think? Okay. Excellent. Listen, that's good thinking because this can be a little confusing. So what you got to do is you got to go back and you got to say, what is this whole question describing? Well, G gets land transferred to him. Then 1 year later, G transfers half of it to K. 1 year later, K transfers a half to A, in which A sells the mineral rights to somebody. So this entire series is talking about disposition or disposing of the property, right? Which falls under fee simple absolute, right? So this describes the characteristics of disposition. And this is the type question you're going to get. And it could come from any one of the deep sea. Okay. It could come from any one: disposition, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and control. So you got to read the question and you got to sit back and think, everything that's happening here is being sold and given away. So that's called disposition or disposing of the property. Okay. Answer B. Very good. That's good thinking. And you got to stop. You got to read the question. You may have to go back and read it again. And then you got to ask yourself, what's going on here? Don't be in such a rush to take this exam, y'all. Take your time. Okay, take your time, enjoy the test. I know that sounds a little bit a double negative, but you can have fun and enjoy the test by going through. These are kind of fun questions. I like these type questions. You got to kind of look for clues and you got to look for keywords and you got to define what they're saying here. And you guys got it right with disposition. Good job. All right, continuing on. Got two questions I'm going to ask in this slide. Now, let's go back and just do a little bit of a review for a freehold, and then we're going to look at leasehold. Okay, remember the word estate and land means the degree, quantity, and nature. How do I own this property, right? Do I own it? What is the nature of my interest in this property? I can own it or I can rent it. Okay, so freehold comes under fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, and you also got life estate that's involved in that. Life estate is possession for the life of the life tenant. Those are the three types of ownerships. And then leasehold is the tenant's right to possess property for the term of a lease. Everybody's kind of familiar with leasing property. Now, for the state exam, you want to know these terms, what estate for years means. An estate for years means there's a start and end date, okay? It could be for hours, it could be for days, it could be for months and years. The key is there's a start date and an end date, okay? That's called an estate for years, which means there's no requirement for termination because you got an end date. Periodic estate means month to month, which means you do got to give a termination date or a termination requirement because you don't have an end date. It's month to month. And then in the estate at will, there is no time. It's just at will. And of course, proper notice needs to be given for cancellation. And then estate at sufferance, this is where no rent is paid and the eviction process begins. This is actually the least of all the tenancies. Fee simple absolute is the highest of all the tenancies. Remember the two types of tenancies, freehold and leasehold. Under freehold, you got fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, and life estate. Under leasehold, you got estate for years, periodic, estate at will, and estate at sufferance. So fee simple absolute is the highest and best of the tenancies. And then estate at sufferance is the least because you haven't even paid rent. There's no rent being paid. So basically, squatting has happened. Okay. So you got two questions. Let's go through them. What are the two main types of possessory interest in real property? What do you think? Remember, we talked about the term estate. Two characteristics. You're looking for two. Okay. Excellent. Right? So we defined estate as what's my interest in the property. I can have two interests in them. I can have freehold, which is ownership, or I can have leasehold, which is leasing. Okay. So that's answer B. Good job. The next question is going to say, what statement about a fee simple absolute estate is false? Now, before you get into it, pay attention to me quickly. Look up here at me real quick. When I do true false questions, like this one right here, which statement about fee simple absolute is false? I'm looking for one false and three true answers. Okay, I kind of cage myself what I'm looking for. So as I'm reading each answer and turning it into a question, I'm looking for three true and one false. And the one false obviously is my answer. So saying that, go ahead and make an attempt at it. Which statement about a fee simple absolute estate is false? Looking for a false answer. So let's go through this as a practice. Ready? Let's look at answer A. Fee simple absolute is the highest form of ownership. I think we all agree to that, right? That's a true statement. Remember, fee simple absolute is the highest and best in the land. Answer B. A fee simple absolute estate is both transferable, but cannot be inherited. So I'm going to sit back and look at this and I'm going to go, wait a minute. I've got fee simple absolute ownership of a property, which means I got full bundle of rights. I can do whatever I want with it, which means I can write a will for somebody and I can leave a will for someone to inherit it. Okay. So that's a true statement. I can do that, which makes this statement false because I can. The fact that it says it cannot be inherited makes it false because you can inherit under fee simple absolute. What is one area? There's one ownership. I'm going to see how well you know this. One ownership that can't be inherited. What is that? What one ownership cannot be inherited? What do you think? One ownership cannot be inherited. Cannot be inherited. Think about the three we're talking about. Fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible, and life estate. Which one of those three cannot be inherited? What do you think? The answer would be a life estate. Remember, a life estate is for the life of a person. If I sell a life estate to somebody, I still retain ownership of the property. They own the life estate, which means as long as they're alive, I cannot take them out of the house. I've sold them a life estate. But when they pass, it comes back to me or goes to a remainder man. So that cannot be an inheritable property based on the life tenant. So if I buy a life estate, okay, and I pay for a life estate, I can't make that inheritable to my family, okay, because I don't own it. I just own the life estate. So a life estate is not inheritable, but a fee simple absolute, fee simple defeasible is inheritable. Okay, so this answer would be false. Answer C says the person can own a fee simple absolute indefinitely. We said in perpetuity or indefinitely. Answer D says a person who owns fee simple absolute has a right of enjoyment. That's one of the deep sea ownership rights. So we're talking about answer B. Okay, so fee simple absolute is the highest form of ownership. It can be owned indefinitely, and you have the right of enjoyment. What you can't do, or what you can do in addition to that, is make it inheritable to a family member, friend, whatever, whoever you want to write a will to. But this answer says you can't. So that would make it false. Okay, so we're looking at answer B. Bravo. Okay. All right, let's continue on. Again, we're still looking at freehold estate, the estate and lands. I want to spend just a little bit of time on fee simple absolute. Again, we need to recognize that it's the highest and best recognized ownership recognized in land. Remember, you want to know these bundle of rights for the state exam: disposition, enjoyment, exclusion, possession, and control. Now, owners can place limitation on the new owner for a fee simple interest. Okay. And we looked at fee simple defeasible. Remember, it's subject to conditions and can revert back to the original owner under fee simple determinable or defeasible fee. Okay. So the question says, watch this now. V owns 20 acres of land in the mountains and decides to deed the land to a cousin. Okay. It says he owns it. So he's got the bundle of rights to dispose of it. We went over that. So he deeds the land to his cousin. V, though, wants to ensure that the pristine beauty of the property is not marred by the development and indicates in the deed, it's written in the deed, that at least 10 acres must remain undeveloped. This is an example of what? So you want to walk through this. V owns 20 acres, deeded it to his cousin. Okay. So either sold it or donated it. But V wanted to ensure to maintain some beautification of the property. So in the deed, V put down instructions that at least 10 acres cannot be developed. What would that be an example of? Okay. Right? We talked about that. Fee simple absolute would mean, hey, the cousin can do anything with that land they want to. But because V put conditions on the property and said you can't develop half of it, that is going to be a fee simple defeasible transfer. Okay. So the grantee is going to receive what's called fee simple defeasible. Now, here's a bonus question I'm going to ask you. What term am I looking for that shows what type of interest the grantee is receiving in the deed? Remember, the grantor is the transferor. Okay, so they got the granting clause. What clause am I looking for the grantee that shows what type of interest they're receiving? What do you think? What is that clause called? Does anybody know? You need to know this for the exam. What is that clause called? The grantee, there's a clause in the deed that shows what ownership interest they're receiving. In this case, we agree that it's fee simple defeasible because the grantor put instructions in the deed that at least 10 acres can't be developed. So there's conditions. If the cousin develops it, then the property can go back to the original owner, V. But what is it called? What clause is in the deed that shows the cousin receiving fee simple defeasible? You remember that term called the habendum clause? You remember the habendum clause? The habendum clause shows the interest that the grantee is going to receive. And that means to have in the hold. So, and it's actually in the actual deed. It'll have language in there that the grantee will have in the hold fee simple defeasible. Okay, fee simple defeasible. All right, that's called the habendum clause. That's in the deed. That's the grantee's clause that shows what ownership they have. If it was just normal, it would be fee simple absolute. If it's a life estate transfer, then it's a life estate habendum clause. Okay, that's close enough, Lisa. All right, so we're talking about answer B. All right, let's talk about life estate. So let me just kind of stop here for a second and kind of summarize what we've been talking about. We talked about property, which we dealt with land. We dealt with implements or fructus industrials. We dealt with perennials, fructus naturals. We saw the difference between them. We looked at water rights, right? Littoral, riparian, and how land is gained and lost. Okay. And then we spent a little bit of time in the first two sections of interest or estate in land, what interest someone has through fee simple, absolute, the highest and best, can do anything with the property within the legal limits. Deep C is the memory aid you want to know. And then we talked about the fee simple defeasible, which is conditioned. Conditions are set for the grantee, for the new owner. If they violate it, it goes back to the original owner. Okay. Now we're going to look at what's called life estate, which is another form of ownership. Okay. It is the least of the ownerships because you own a life estate. You don't own the property. So don't confuse this as ownership of the property. You own the life estate of the property. Okay. It is a freehold interest in the property. Okay. The individual is called a life tenant. Okay. Remember, it is not inheritable because of the duration of the life tenant. What happens when the life tenant expires? The property goes back to the owner or is assigned to someone else. Okay. It is ownership. Don't confuse this. It's not a lease. You're not renting property. It's kind of a quasi ownership, if you want to say. You own the interest in the property, but not the property itself. Okay. And so basically, the ownership is only good for the life of that person. So you have possession, ordinary use. You don't have legal title. Okay. So you can't create a will. You can enjoy the profits from the life estate. Okay. If it's farmland, you can enjoy the fruits of it. You can do anything with that property that you would in fee simple absolute, but it's only going to be for the time you're living. Okay. Once you expire, it goes back to the original owner. Now, let me make this a little bit more clear for you when it comes to life estate. Let's say, for example, I've got a house that I put on the market for 300,000. You come along, you want to buy it, and so we go through the normal transaction of a purchase. We go to closing. I'm the grantor. I deed you the property. Your habendum clause says fee simple absolute. You've got ownership of the property. You walk out with the keys. I get my check for the home, and off we go. It's a normal transfer. It's a deeded transfer. You own it. Fee simple absolute. You paid $300,000 for the home. Let's take that same home that's valued at 300,000, but now let's say that a widow comes and wants to buy a life estate. And let's say this individual may be 92, 93. Okay. Life expectancy, not long, right? Am I going to sell a life estate to her for 300,000? The answer is no. I may prorate, maybe based on the rental market, inflation, etc. I may prorate out 10 years, okay, life expectancy, and sell that individual life estate based on that. It may be instead of 300,000, I may sell the life estate for 85,000. Okay. They can get a loan, they can mortgage a life estate as well. But I'm not going to charge a full valuation. So to keep things in perspective between a normal sale and what a life estate sale could be, it's based on the life tenant, the life of the life tenant. So many times life estates are sold to a lot of senior citizens, right? Not to say they can't be sold to younger folks, but if I'm going to sell a property to someone that's 25 and I want to sell them a life estate with a life expectancy of 70 years, I don't know. So, the purpose of doing that is selling to someone for the duration of their life. And I may not charge them the full valuation of that property. That kind of keeps things in perspective. It makes it a little bit more understandable from the standpoint of what life estate is. They own the possessory and the use of it, but they don't own the property legally. Okay. You can enjoy the profits. Again, they can sell the life estate. Interesting. If I sell a life estate to this lady, that lady can turn around and sell it to someone else, a life estate only, their life estate, but it's only good for her life. So whoever bought the life estate is dependent on the life of that other person that sold it. Okay. But they can sell a life estate. They can actually mortgage a life estate. They can lease out their life estate. It's like they own the property outright, but it's only for the life of the life tenant. Do they have these rights to it? Okay. All right. Here we go. B owns property, fee simple. If you see the word fee simple, they're talking about absolute, highest and best. So B owns property, fee simple. He grants a life estate to Z and a remainder estate to X. Okay. So Z is the life tenant. X is who's going to get the property after Z expires. The life estate is based on Z's life. Life tenant Z cannot. Okay. And go through what do you think? All right, got a couple of mixed answers, but this is what we're here for. Let's straighten this out. Remember, let's go back over this real quick. Life estate is possessory. You don't own the property legally. You own the life estate, which means you can live there as long as you're alive. What you can't do is create a will, because when you die, it goes back to the original owner. So there can be no will created for your family if you live in it under a life estate purchase. Okay. I can enjoy everything in that property that anybody else could if they owned it outright. I can sell my life estate to anybody, family members, strange. I can sell it to anybody I want, but it's based on my life. I can mortgage it with a bank. In other words, finance my life estate. I can even lease out my life estate. I can do anything the owner could do, but I don't own the property legally. So when we say B owns property fee simple and grants a life estate to Z and a remainder estate to X, which means X is going to get the property. In other words, they're in line for the property after Z expires. The life estate is based on Z's life. So life tenant Z cannot give the life estate away to someone else. No, they can. Live on the property. Yes, they can. Sell the life estate to a stranger. Absolutely. Sell it to anybody they want. Can they will the life estate to a family member? And the answer is no, they can't, because it's based on their life. Okay. So we're looking at answer D, Delta. Okay. Excellent. You guys are doing excellent. All right. Moving right along. All right. Let's stay in life estate. Let's continue on, because there's some more information I want to put towards. Now, again, just to kind of in review, the life estate is the interest in real property for the life of the owner, called the life tenant. Okay, whoever purchases the life estate is called the life tenant. Now, what has to take place is the life tenant must maintain the property. Okay, they can't commit waste. Okay, which means destroy the property. Now, what happens to the title at the transfer of the life tenant's death? Okay, so what's going to happen to the property? Okay, again, the life estate is in the name of the life tenant. They occupy it for the duration of their life. They expire, and there's two possibilities you want to know. It's called a remainder estate or an estate in reversion. A remainder estate is typically assigned to a third party, okay, as we saw in that previous question, okay? Third party is going to hold a remainder interest while the life estate exists, okay? So there's someone else in line. That's called remainder estate. An estate in reversion, or a reversionary estate, is when it's going to go back to the original owner, okay? So it's going to, in other words, the life tenant expires, the property is going to go back to the original owner. Remainder estate or remainder man, you may see the term remainder man, is when the life tenant expires, it's going to be assigned to a third party. It will state that in the deed. Okay, so the remainder or reversion estate, it will state it in the actual deed itself. Okay, the life estate deed. So the question may read, G bought a house for K to live in. Although G remains the owner, when K dies, G wants to retain possession of the property. Who will own the property when K dies, and what is that person called? What do you think? Again, you got to go through this scenario, break it down. Okay?
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.
All right. Good answers. So let's look at this. Remember, remainder man is the one that's going to be assigned after the life tenant expires. It's going to another person. Okay. If I own the property and I give a life estate to an individual and I put you as the remainder man, when this individual expires, that property will go to you. Okay. They're called the remainder man. The reversionary or estate in reversion is when the life tenant dies, it's going to come back to me as the owner. Okay. So basically, you're next in line as the remainder man. Okay. So G bought a house from K to live in. Although G remains the owner, when K dies, G wants to retain possession of the property, wants the property to come back. Who will own the property when K dies and what they're called? So the property is going to go back to G, who is called a reversionary or a reversioner. Okay, very good. Is everybody clear on this? We good? Give me a thumbs up. Everybody's good so far? We all good? All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about, again, going back to talk about real property versus personal property. Now, if you look under A, personal property, you may see a term called personality, or you may see the word chattel on the state exam. Don't be confused. They all mean the same thing, okay? Now, again, we talked about personal property that are items that can be moved in the house, okay? What are the items that are permanent, or the items in the house that is called real property? What is another term for that? Can anybody type that in? What is that called? What is it called? For example, you see the pool table, you see the lights hanging down over the pool table. What is that called? What's the technical word we say? See the lights? Okay. Okay, Lisa. The lights hanging over the pool table, not the pool table, I'm talking about the lights. The lights hanging over the pool table. You can barely see them. Or if you look at the lights in the bar that are lighting up the bar, or you see the lights hanging over the little round table, all those, and I got several different answers. Immovables that would be considered real property, but the term we're looking for are fixtures. You want to know that term for the state exam. Fixtures is real property that can't be moved. Okay. Your appliances, built-in appliances, cabinets, the flooring, all the lighting in the house, all the electrical with the lighting, the plumbing, toilets, sinks, all that. That's all considered real property. Yes, it is. But it's defined as fixtures. Okay. They are immovable, but the correct term on the state exam is fixtures of things in the house. Okay. When we see the term immovable, we're talking about the term of the actual structure itself. Inside, we reference those as fixtures. But you're correct. They cannot be moved. Immovable they are, and they are considered real property. But you're going to want to know the word fixture on the state exam. So if you look at the pool table, I can load that up in a moving van. I don't have to. It's not permanently mounted. Neither is the little round coffee table right there with the chairs and the lamps, the bar stools. All that's considered movables. All that's considered personal property. Okay. Can be moved. It's not permanent. Okay. It can get a little sticky. And I want to bring this to your attention. When you get out in the real world, you got to be careful about these things, because if you're listing a property, you got to be aware of what could be misinterpreted as being a fixture or not a fixture. Okay. And so typically in the kitchen, all the built-in appliances stay. Okay. They're considered. If I got a microwave on a countertop that I can unplug, that's considered personal property. But if I got a microwave that's put into a casing that's above the oven that's in a casing, then that's going to be considered real property. It's going to be considered a fixture because it's part of the actual appliances that are installed. Okay. Washer and dryers, that can be rolled out. Those are considered personal property. Okay. Now, you want to know a term called attachment. There's two terms when it comes to fixtures: attachment and what's called severance. Let's say, for example, I move that pool table and I want to change that lighting. If I take that lighting and undo it and lay it on the floor, what happens to that fixture after it's been severed? Is that considered real property or personal property while it's laying on the floor? What do you think? And you want to know this. You got to know this for the state exam. If I take that lighting down, okay, I unscrew it, disconnect the wiring, I take it out of the ceiling because I want to put a ceiling fan there or something, and I lay it on the floor, is it now personal property or does it remain real property? What do you think? All right, good. Right? So we're talking about personal property. While it's attached, that's called attachment, then it is a fixture. But if I sever it, the word severance, you'll see, that means I'm taking it down, I'm laying it on the floor. That means it's personal property. Now, if I got a ceiling fan on the floor that I'm going to replace, right, and I take the lighting down, I've got two personal properties on the floor right now with some wires hanging. Now I'm going to take the ceiling fan and install it. When I install it, that's called attachment. See, when I took the lighting down, that's called severance or to sever. But now I'm attaching the ceiling fan. I've taken personal property and I've converted it to real property. That's called a fixture. Now that it's installed, it now belongs to the property. And so I may take that lighting and box it up, put it in the garage for safe keeps or use it for something else. But you want to know attachment and severance, okay? And what state, real or personal, depending how it's mounted or if it's not mounted, you want to identify that in a test question. You also want to know that in-ground swimming pools is considered real property. Above ground swimming pools are considered personal property, okay? Pergolas, you see the pergola in the bottom picture against the house. That pergola is kind of an outdoor, it's concreted, it's in the ground. The landscape is all permanent. We talked about perennials or fructus naturals. So you can see the grass and the plants and the trees in the background. Now, you see the bird bath. That's personal property, right? Because that can be just loaded up and carted out. So that's personal property. You see the barbecue pit. That's personal property. Okay. You see the table with the umbrella folded down. That's personal property. The fence line, the wall on the other side of the pool, the pergola, the concrete, the in-ground pool, that's all considered real property. Okay. So again, distinguishing between real property and personal property, distinguishing severance, attachment, and what state the property is in, whether it's attached or severed, you want to know that. Okay. All right. So you may have a test question that says, which is not an example of an attachment? All right, good. Excellent. Couple good answers. Which one is not an example? Right? Basketball hoop, those things that are on wheels, you can push it in the garage. That's considered personal property. A greenhouse that's permanent and built, that's part of a structure or an improvement. The lily pond, just like an in-ground pool, that's considered part of the land. Uncut rose bushes, again, not considered personal property. So they're all considered part of an attachment, right? The one that doesn't reflect that is a basketball hoop, right? This can be rolled into the garage. That's personal property. Very good. All right. All right. Let's continue on. This is a very, very important section that I'm getting ready to go over. So pay attention very, very closely. Continuing on with fixtures, we kind of got we laid some basic foundation when it comes to fixtures, when it comes to attachment, severance, real property, and personal property. I think you guys got the vision. But this section right here, when it comes to fixtures, can be very troublesome to try to figure out on the state exam. Okay. Remember, we define fixture as real property. Okay. It's attached to the home, it's permanent. Okay. If it's not attached to the home, it's considered personal property. We just covered that in the last slide. So we identify a fixture as permanent to the home. Okay. Now, the legal test that the court systems in common law, again, we're talking about common law. Over the years, there have been so many discussions in legal battles over what's a fixture, what's not a fixture. Oh, the homeowner took this with him. It should have stayed with the house. And so on. And just scores and scores of legal battles over this. So the courts came up with a legal test that you want to kind of know for the state exam, and also kind of keep this in your little playbook when you're dealing with clients. Okay. Now, anytime you get the parties to agree, that's perfect. That's what you want, right? If there's any confusion, listen to me carefully, on if it's a fixture or not, as long as the parties agree, you got it in writing, we're good to go. Okay, so that's an easy one. Now, the relationship between the parties, or the relationship of the parties. For example, if I'm renting a property that you own and I go in and install a fixture, okay, what's my relationship is going to be I'm a tenant, right? I'm a tenant. Typically, if I install something that's permanent and it's going to be a fixture, I myself am going to obviously get permission. But and then the other thing is I'm going to absolutely make an agreement that I can take it with me. Okay, so what's my relationship with the parties? Okay, the other one is the intention of the party placing the item. Now, I've got a couple examples on this one, on number 3. If you look at the top 2 pictures, you look at the far right one, you can see that all I would have to do is unplug it, lift up the window a little bit, take those accordions, fold them in, and pull the air conditioner in, put it in the box, and shut the window, right? May take maybe 30 seconds, okay? What is my intention is not to make it permanent. So in this case, that window unit to the far right would be personal property. Okay. Again, if you're touring property and you see a window unit and it looks like this, you want to make sure there's an agreement between the parties whether it stays or goes. But for the state exam, what's the intention of the party? If you look at a picture like that, you're going to say, that's not a permanent installment. I can take that down, close the window, and I can pack it up and put it in the back of a truck in a matter of minutes. Okay. So we're not saying permanent there. So that's going to be personal property. However, if on the left air conditioner unit, I'm going to take out the window, you can see there's no window, and I'm putting some type of external siding with a cutaway that an AC unit's going to fit into, mounted on a bracket that's bolted into the concrete. What's my intention there? My intention there is to make it permanent. So under the law, under the courts, they would say this is considered a fixture. Okay. So when we talk about what's the intention of the party placing the items, that's what we're looking at. Is there intention? And you know what's so interesting about it is I don't need to hear from a defendant. I don't need to hear from whoever's getting sued or what. If I've got a seller that's putting, and I'm looking at this picture and I got to make a judgment on that, on the left top picture, I'm going to say it's a fixture. Okay. So we have to compensate the buyer either with a new air conditioner or go back and put the one you took out in. If I'm looking at the one on the right, and I see that, and then I see another picture with the window closed, there's no case there. Okay. The window does not belong to you, Mr. New Buyer. Okay. So, intention of the party. So, you want to read the question, pay special care about how you read it, and know what their intention is. The last one is the method of attachment. So, what is my intention? Really will determine my method. Okay. Now, a couple of examples when we talk about actual annexation. Annexation means to adopt to, right? You're bringing it on board. So if you look at the bottom left, this is more popular than anything. Surround around systems, flat screen TVs mounted on brackets that are mounted to a wall. Okay, these are very popular. 9 times out of 10, when you show a property, you're going to probably see a minimum of 3 or 4 of these TVs mounted to the wall throughout the house. And what you want to know about this is if you look at the speakers, you see how the speakers are mounted to the brick walls? They're wired, by the way, to the brick wall. They're wired to the brick wall. They're permanent. That's considered a fixture. But what about the receiver on the actual shelving there below the TV? That goes with the speakers, right? Well, I can unplug those and put them in a box in a matter of 5-10 seconds. Is that personal property? And the answer is no. What they mean by actual annexation is it's actually going to be a fixture because it belongs to the speakers that are permanently mounted. It comes as a unit. Okay. Same thing with the TV. Same thing with the brackets. The TV, I pull the pin, I can slide it off, unplug it, undo the cable. And now most of the time you got these apps on these TVs now that you don't even need cable anymore. So the point is the bracket is the only thing that's mounted permanently to the wall. That's permanent. That's the fixture. The TV slides off like the air conditioning unit does and closes the windows. So that's considered personal property. Again, when you get into the real world, you want to make sure your agreement between the parties. Okay, that's very, very important that you understand, not only for the state exam, but when you get in real life. You're really going to need to pay attention to this because it can get ugly quick. The last one under 4B is constructive annexation. If you look at the bottom right picture, you see I got a set of keys in the door. Okay, there's a set of keys in the door. Now, if I'm sitting at the closing table and we sign paperwork and this is my house and I just sold it to you, I'm going to give you the keys. Are those keys considered fixtures or personal property? Well, John, they're personal property. Come on, they're keys. No, because they belong to the front door. They are constructively annexed to the front door. It is a fixture I'm giving you. Okay. Same thing with the garage door opener. Okay. All it is an electronic box, but it belongs to the unit that's permanently mounted. So constructively, it's annexed. It belongs to that. That box, electric control, and the keys are considered fixtures. Okay. So you really want to have a good opportunity to really digest this, rest your eyes on this, and really understand these legal tests. Okay. All right, here we go. Question 1. J buys a house from K. J assumed that the curtains would be included in the price. Even though the agreement of the sale did not list them, what is the best argument J could make to persuade a judge if this goes to court? Here's the key words you're looking for. Assume that the curtains would be included in the price. Okay. So you have to keep that in mind. What do you think? If you thought curtains would be included in the price, how would you present that to a judge? What do you think? Okay, got a couple of mixed answers. So Remember, we talked about annexation or method of attachment. Remember, when we speak of method of attachment, we were talking about the receivers below the TV. They belong, right? They belong to the speakers because the speakers are permanently mounted. In this case, and this is really a really hard question, kind of a trick question. But if Jay assumed the curtains would be included in the price, it's because Jay thought the curtains were custom made for that odd shaped window. In other words, if they took the curtains with them, where else would they fit? In other words, they were made to fit that window. Okay. Again, method of attachment, not method of attachment, but we're talking about, method of attachment. We're talking about actual annexation. In other words, it fits that purpose in that, because you're talking about a window that's built specifically at an odd shape, and those curtains were designed just for that window. So that would be the argument. We're talking about answer C. Okay. Again, for test purposes, you want to be familiar with these, but in real life, you really want to bring this up in open discussion and get it in writing. Okay. All right. Next question is, what term describes a property that transfers with ownership of a house? What term describes a property that transfers with the ownership of a house? What do you think? Okay. Perfect. There you go. We're talking about property. Could it be personal or is it real property? And what we understand it is the property that goes with the ownership of the house is going to be fixtures. Okay. So we're talking about answer D. Now, the third question I wanted to ask about fixtures is, which item is least likely to be a fixture? Okay. So you got to go through here and ask yourself, which item in here is least likely to be a fixture? Go ahead. Which item is least likely to be a fixture? All right. Now, I like this question because you got to stop and you got to really role play. Okay. And this is kind of what I'm telling you about test question analysis. Remember, let's review about fixtures. We talked about the word severance and attachment. Okay. Severance and attachment. All right. When we talk about a severance and attachment, what are we talking about? When we attach, we make it personal to real property. If we sever it, we take it from real property, which is a fixture, and we make it personal property. Okay. So it was a fixture at one time, but because we've severed it, it's no longer a fixture. It's personal property. So you have to go through here and you've got to say what is least likely to be a fixture. Okay. So the first answer I'm looking at is, and here's where they're going to trick you, a built-in washer. Many people will stop there and say, that's a fixture. And they press on and they go to a curio cabinet in the living room. And then they go keys to the house and then the white picket fence. Okay. But they won't read the full answer of A. Okay. Answer A. The built-in washer that's at the repair shop at the day of closing. Okay. So you got a built-in washer. Okay. That's at the built-in's the key word. That's at the repair shop now. So attached, built-in fixture, severance, take it out, at the repair shop, personal property, not a fixture. Okay. So we're talking about answer A. And let me emphasize this to you. This is very important. Pay attention to me carefully. I've been doing this a long time. These test writers do this purposely because they know the human side of us, we're quick readers, and when we see a certain verbiage, we're going to roll with it. We won't even finish the question. We won't even finish the answer. For example, again, if I'm reading this and I've got a real quick speed about myself, I'm going to go built-in washer. Boom, I stop there and I go, that's the fixture. That's not the answer. And then I try to look out of B, C, and D, what's going to best fit that. And curio cabinet kind of may fit into that if you understand that keys belong to the house and the white picket fence. But you got to finish. Built-in washer that's at the repair shop means it's not a fixture anymore. It's been severed and it's personal property, not a fixture. Does that make sense? Does everybody see what I'm talking about? And these questions are important. And the reason we have these type questions in here is to try to condition you. We're in the weight room. I want you to get in shape. I want you to condition yourself to absolutely develop a system where you're reading these questions consistently, you're analyzing, and you're looking for keywords, both in the question and the answers. For example, in the answer of A, if you stopped at built-in washer, you're going to say it's a fixture and move on. But if you read it and you're going, wait a minute. Yes, it's a built-in washer. Yes, it's a fixture, but we've severed it and it's at the repair shop. It's not a fixture anymore. So it's put back. Attachment. It's been severed. So that's not a fixture. So we're looking for answer A. Okay. So develop a system in how you're going to read these questions. All right. All right, here we go. Let's talk about, again, under the ownership of states' rights and interests, we have a term called the doctrine of prior appropriation. Okay. This is a term that's very popular for a state exam question. And basically what this doctrine means is, and it's state controlled. Okay. You get out west in Nevada, you get out west in Arizona, California, those western states that have rainfalls that don't amount to what we have here. Maybe perhaps on the eastern seaboard in the southern states, we have a lot of rain. Water table is pretty high to the surface. So these issues don't become so much of a problem as it is out west. But what happens is the state will appropriate, hence the word prior appropriation. They'll appropriate how water is going to be used due to the supply limitation of it. Okay. So it's not every day that a person could go out and wash their car and wash their motorcycle and water the lawn all day. Okay. So those things are going to be regulated by the state due to the fact of the droughts that they predetermine, and they issue what's called the doctrine of prior appropriation, how water and who can use it, and for what reasons and for how long. Okay. You may see a test question called coastal waters, about coastal waters, and you're looking around 13.8 miles from land is considered coastal, which is under the restriction of that state. Once you get outside of that, you're in international waters. Okay. So the local government can control any type of ownership rights out to 13.8 miles of that seashore. Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, up the eastern seaboard, California, etc. Okay. So doctrine of prior appropriation and coastal waters. All right. A landowner needs water. His land contains no available water source. However, the landowner is given the right to cross over his next door neighbor's property to run a pipeline from a river to his land. Which right grants this permission? Remember, how water is appropriated can mean from how it's used, who can use it, and where it comes from, like this example here. Okay. So we're talking about the doctrine of prior appropriation, how this water can be actually funneled in to be used. Okay. Is part of that. So we're talking about answer A, which is under appropriation, or the doctrine of prior appropriation. Okay. Answer A.
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.
All right. I got this slide here. We're kind of swinging back a little bit. Not really going to go into a big review, but here's what I want to talk about when it comes to real property versus personal property. Okay. How is it transferred in a real estate sale? Okay. Say, for example, you own this farmland. Okay. And that is your combine. Okay. And you've hired someone to come in and harvest your wheat for you. You own the land. And you've hired someone to come in and do that. Now, you're going to sell that farmland to me and you're going to move to New York City. Okay. No reason, no reason for you to bring that combine to Manhattan. All right. No reason for that. So you want to sell that with the property. In its state right now, that is considered personal property. Okay. It is considered personal property. It's not permanent. It's like a car. It's like a motorcycle. It's like a pool table. You own it and there's no other use except for the land, but it's considered personal property. So how is that transferred when you sell the farmland to me? When you transfer real property, which is the land, the improvement, that plus improvement, real estate, all the fixtures appropriated, all the real property appropriated, is transferred and financed, financed, and is transferred with a deed, right? That's how you transfer. Convey is another term. Convey the property through a deed, okay? But now you got this combine you want to transfer, right? In this finance sale, how's that going to be transferred? It's called a bill of sale. That is the term you're looking for on the state exam, okay? This is how personal property is transferred, is through a bill of sale, okay? A lender may or may not finance this combine and the transfer of that farmland. If it's not financed by the lender and they're only going to finance what the improvement is or the real estate, then you may have to get another loan from another bank. But nevertheless, when you buy this combine at the closing, you'll get deeded a property and you're going to get a bill of sale. Okay. And they'll receive their money. Okay. So any personal property that's transferred is transferred through a bill of sale. Any property that's transferred that's real property is transferred through the deed. Okay. So the question says, B bought a farm and the sale included 2 tractors. What is required at the settlement to transfer ownership of those tractors? What do you think? Okay. Good. Excellent. All right. Bill of sale. Everybody's clear on that. All right. All right. Let's move on and talk about encumbrances. Now, I got 3 questions associated with this. This is another big section when it comes to the real estate exam. An encumbrance is a charge or claim on property. Okay. It does lessen the value and how the property is used. The 2 types of encumbrances you want to know is a lien and easements. Okay. Those are the 2 types you want to know. Now, listen to me carefully. Think of an encumbrance as an umbrella. Okay. An umbrella over the land, over the home, an umbrella over the whole property. You got to vision this. That is called an encumbrance because from that encumbrance hangs a lien on the property, which lessens the value and it restricts the property. And also there may be an easement on the property. You remember the term appurtenant easement, easement by necessity, easement in gross, the right for one to use the land of another. Okay, you remember those terms? Those easements and those liens that are on this property encumber. Okay, so if you can think always of an umbrella over the property that has liens and easements on it, it does lessen the value and it does have certain property usage associated with it. Okay, liens and easements. Now, the liens we're going to talk about specifically out of these encumbrances. The liens provide security for the debt. In other words, if I lend you $300,000 to buy a home, I'm going to put a lien on that property if the title is in your name. Okay. If they put the deed in your name, how am I going to protect my $300,000 is to put a lien on it. Because when you turn around and sell the property, you have to pay that lien off. So I'm guaranteed my money back. Okay. Even if you don't pay my money back on a monthly basis, I can foreclose on the property. Okay. But I've got a lien on the property to protect me as far as my debt goes. Okay. So it's security for the debt. Now, the types of liens you want to know for the state exam: voluntary lien, which means it was agreed by the parties. In other words, you went to the bank and borrowed money, and the bank says, "Yep, I'll lend you 300, but I'm putting a lien on your property." You say, "Good, no problem." That's a voluntary lien. You're allowing it to happen. Involuntary means the law did it. John, you did not pay your property tax this year. Oh, we're putting a lien on your property. Well, why are you doing that? Well, the law says we can, because you didn't pay your property tax. That's an involuntary lien. A specific lien is to that property or specific to that property. And a general lien is general to all the properties if you own multiple properties. Okay. Specific lien, like a mortgage, that's only to one house that's bought. Tax lien, to one house that wasn't paid taxes. A general lien could be on all your properties. If I didn't pay the IRS my federal income tax, they're not going after one property. They're coming after me, so they can put the lien on all my properties. Okay? So you want to signify and differentiate. What's the difference between voluntary, involuntary? Am I willingly letting the lien come on? So that's a voluntary lien. If it's involuntary, it means the law puts it on there, like a construction lien, a mechanic's lien. Let's say I agree to pay a contractor a certain amount of money. They put a swimming pool in and I don't pay them. Well, we got a contract. I didn't pay them the full, so he can put a lien on my property. Well, I don't want it. Well, the law says I can. So it's involuntary. Okay. So you got to kind of talk this out when you read the scenario. You got to talk it out. Am I allowing it to happen, or is the law doing it? And is it specific to one property, or can it go on to all my properties? Okay. Now, continuing on, statutory liens are created by law. Okay. Like a tax lien. Statutory means state laws, right? Revised statutes. So the state laws in each state, if you don't pay your taxes, we can put a lien on your property. That's a statutory lien. A judgment lien is a court order. Okay. It's a lawsuit. Who's the lawsuit against? It's not against the property. It's against the person. Okay. So that would be a general lien. It can go on any property, just like an income tax. A vendor's lien is someone that's owner financing. In other words, you want to buy my house and you say, "John, I can't, the bank won't lend me the money. I don't qualify." I say, "Well, look, I'll finance it for you. I'm going to be the bank. So I lend you the money." Well, I'm going to put a lien on the property that you bought because it's my money. I'm the vendor. So it's called the vendor's lien. It's not a bank lien. It's not a mortgage lien. It's a vendor's lien because it's seller financing. Okay. And then we talk about a mechanic's lien is a lien for the unpaid labor cost. Okay. So you want to know some different types of liens and how they're appropriated. Two questions. First one is the lien that could only cover a single property is considered. Which of the following is a lien that only covers a single property? Okay, Lisa. Good. Single property tax lien. If I have five properties, not 10, but 5, sorry about that. If I have 5 properties and I don't pay tax on one of my properties, the county is not going to come and put liens on all my properties. They're only going to put on the one that I didn't pay tax on. So a tax lien is considered a specific involuntary lien. That's what type of lien it is. Specific to the property, involuntary because the law puts it there. Okay. All right, the second question is, what type of lien is voluntary? What type of lien is voluntary? Okay. Remember, voluntary means you agree to it. Is a mortgage. Now, let me ask you this question. Is a mortgage a specific lien or a general lien? What do you think? Is a mortgage a specific lien or a general lien? Okay, I got one answer, two answers. Okay, a mortgage is going to be specific, right? It's going to be a specific voluntary lien. Okay. How about a judgment lien? Is a judgment lien specific or general lien? What do you think? A judgment lien. Okay. It's on the person, right? Someone's been sued, maybe an automobile accident, whatever the case may be. It's a general lien that can be put on all the properties. Okay. Is it voluntary or involuntary? What about a judgment lien? Voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary. Okay, good. So here's what you want to do. Listen to me carefully. You want to role play this when you're looking at the actual test question. You got to ask yourself, is the law putting it there or am I putting it there? That's going to give you your voluntary or involuntary. Second thing you got to ask, is it go on one property or can it go on all the properties? Okay, because if you get a multiple answer like involuntary specific, voluntary specific, if you get a multiple answer, you got to kind of sit back and you got to descramble these things because it can be confusing. So you got to kind of go through them like that. Okay, that's how I like to teach it. So you have a vision on how to go through it and role play to find out what the right answer is. Okay. All right. The next question is, which of the following or which of the below is not a specific lien? Okay, La Quinta, good. Think about this now. Let's role play this. Specific lien. Specific. What are we saying specific? Specific to a property, one. Okay, not multiple, one property, specific property. It's a lien on a specific property. So if we look at a mortgage is only going to one property, specific. A construction lien or a mechanics lien, again, the work was done on one property. Okay, put a swimming pool in, put a roof on, whatever. It's one property. Property tax lien, one property, specific. Income tax lien, somebody forgot to pay their income tax. Okay, that's a general lien. That's not specific because they're not after the property, they're after the person. So it's going to attach to all the properties. So that's a general lien. It's general to all the properties. A, B, and C are specific to one property. Okay. So we're looking at answer D, DD delta. All right. Let's switch to a little bit of math here. This comes under the valuation section, the appraisal section, as one of the ways an appraiser will absolutely appraise property. Remember, anything more than 4 units, they use the income approach. More than 4 units, that creates potential gross income minus vacancy, gives it an effective gross income. Then you take away your net operating or your expenses to get your net operating income, divided by a capitalization rate, and you can get a value for a rental building, apartment building, of more than 4 units. But what happens if you got a single family home renting, a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex? 1 through 4, not to include 5 or more, that's the income approach. This is what the appraisers are going to use, called the gross rent multiplier. So they create value up to 4 units. Okay. It's not a substitution for the income approach. Okay. You need to know the income approach as well. That's 5 or more. Okay. Now, the gross rent multiplier is based on monthly rent. So if your calculation gives you your rent in an annual figure or yearly, you got to divide by 12. Okay. If it gives it to you semi-annually, you got to divide by 2. If it gives you the rent quarterly, okay, that's every 3 months. Okay, you got to divide by 3. Okay, so you got to watch what unit of measurement the rent is in, and then you got to bring it to a monthly rent. Okay, because that's how you're going to calculate this problem. The formula is very easy. Okay, value equals gross rent multiplier, or the GRM. That's the variable, times the rent. Okay. The GRM is a number, much like the capitalization rate in the income approach, that the appraiser will have based on other properties. They'll get a GRM average. They'll take the monthly rent, multiply it times the GRM that's established, and they'll get the value of the home. Okay. So let's look at a couple of questions. The first one is in theory. Which factor is used in determining the gross rent multiplier? What do you think? Which factor is used in determining the gross rent multiplier? What factor? All right. Right, we talked about it, gross rent multiplier. The factor we're going to use is monthly rent. Okay, the gross monthly rent. Okay, good. Now, the second question is a calculation. So get out your calculators right now. And I want you to work this problem. I'm going to give you about a minute and a half. Each unit in a fourplex rents for $225 per month. With the sales price of $81,000, what is the gross rent multiplier? Okay, so go ahead and work that out. Everybody good? All right, let's go back and review real quick. We said value equals GRM times rent. Okay, value is equal to GRM times rent. Now, you got to know this for the state exam. So my advice, if you get a problem like this, go to your scratch paper, write down the formula. Value equals GRM times rent. You got to know that, okay? So it's just an algebraic equation. They give you the rent and they give you the value. So you're going to have to find the GRM, which is the gross rent multiplier. So what I'll do is take the value divided by the rent. It gives me my GRM. So I got to calculate what the rent is. I got 4 units. They rent for $225 per month. So I got to go 4 times $225. My total rent for the fourplex is $900. Okay, so I write that down on my scratch paper. I know that value equals GRM times rent. So I'm looking for the value. I put my value down equals GRM. That's what I'm looking for, times rent, $225. So if I take 81,000 divided by 900, it's my rent, I get 90, okay, which is my GRM. Be answer C, okay? Answer C. Remember, GRM, you got to convert everything to monthly, okay? Don't forget, they're going to give you some problems and you got to calculate what the rent is. They're just not going to give you rent $900. They're going to say a fourplex or a duplex, right? So you got to You got to factor that in to get your monthly rent. And then your sales price. And then you get your GRM and 90. Okay. Now, they could give you a fourplex that rents for $225 per month. And they'll say in there, the GRM is 90. What is the value of the property? Okay. So again, value equals GRM, which is 90 times 900, 81,000 would be the answer. So it's just an algebraic equation that you have to appropriate depending on what you have to find. Okay. Here it's a gross rent multiplier. So you're going to divide the value by the rent. Okay. All right. Continuing on. Concept of value, principle of substitution. You got to know these terms. The principle of substitution, this is the max price that's set by a property that is equally sold in value. Why would I pay more for the home I want when the one next door sold for this? Okay. That's called the principle of substitution. Highest and best use, what's the greatest value that this property can produce? Has to be legal, financially feasible, and physically possible. And so to determine that, I would say, what is the highest and best use I could get out of this property? Sell it like it is, tear the building down and sell it as commercial land, renovate it as a bed and breakfast, tear it down and build a new bed and breakfast, tear it down and put a corporate office, put a small hotel. What's the highest and best use? This is what we're talking about. Okay. Highest and best use. It's got to be legal. It's got to be financially feasible and physically feasible as well. Increasing and decreasing return. What is my cost contribution and what's my return? My return's greater than my cost, it's increasing returns. If it's less than my costs I put in, it's decreasing returns. This is the economic indicator for the appraised value. Okay. Conformity, that's like size, location, design. In other words, apples to apples. Okay. If I'm appraising a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I'm looking for comparables that are 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Assemblage and plottage are two terms you want to know. They go together. Assemblage is the physical combining of two lands or two lots together. Okay. Two lots that may list for $50,000 each. I'm going to resurvey it and make it a 1-acre lot. 2 half-acre lots, it's now 1 acre. When I sell it, if the value of that 1 acre exceeds the value of the 2 independent half acres, that's called plottage. Okay. So if they're 50,000 each, I sold them, I'd get 100,000. If I resurveyed it, put it together as a 1 acre lot and sold it for 200,000, then I've made 100,000 above. If I would have sold them individually, that's called plottage. That's the increase in value by assembling them together. You want to know those two terms. Progression, small home, big houses around it. Value comes up. Conversely, regression, you're a big home, small homes around you. Value comes down. Okay. So be familiar with the concept of value because you got a lot of questions they can ask from these principles, these terms. All right. A smaller, well-maintained home in a subdivision of larger homes will need to benefit from its proximity to larger homes. What principal value applies? What do you think? Okay. Excellent. Progression. Remember, small home, big houses around it. Value goes up. Regression is the opposite. You're a big house. I actually had one of my good friends had a huge, this thing was like 7,000 square feet, bunch of bedrooms, big French Acadian home, beautiful home. But he built it in a nice subdivision, but all the homes around him were selling about 70% less than what he, valued his property at. Took him 2 years to sell it. 2 years. People were buying other homes around him, right? They were buying other homes around him for way less because they didn't really need that big property, but he was surrounded by smaller homes. So it brought his value down. All right. Let's switch gears and talk about contracts. Okay. Big chapters here. You really want to spend some time in contracts. Now, you're going to see two terms, executory and executed. All right. Executory means it's unfinished. A purchase agreement, although it's signed, offered, and accepted, it's still not in an executed format. It's executory because when a contract becomes executed, it's not when it's signed, it's when it's at the closing table and the deed transfers. Remember, the deed is the byproduct of the contract. So the contract is executory or unfinished until the deed transfers at closing. Okay? Keep that in mind. A valid deed means it meets the legal system, all essential elements, and it's enforceable in a court of law. A verbal, listen to me carefully, a verbal agreement, also called a parole contract, P-A-R-O-L, you may see that on the state exam, does not meet the statutes of fraud. The statutes of fraud, by definition and in theory, means that a contract to be enforceable has to be in writing. Okay? How can you enforce a verbal contract if two parties don't agree to it? There's no proof. It's not on paper. There's no signatures. So verbal agreements are unenforceable unless the parties agree to it. Right? Judge Judy goes through this every day. She goes through this every day. Right? She's looking for something. She calls it the four corners. That's what she calls her contracts. But she can't enforce something that's verbal. It's a verbal agreement. Okay. So you want to know executory, unfinished. Talking about real estate contract, unfinished. But John, it's signed. It's accepted. It's a valid contract. Yes, it is. But it's still executory because it doesn't become executed until the closing's done. Remember, that closing is indicative of the written agreement that you signed. So if you never transfer the property, that contract's never executed. Okay? Keep that in mind when you read the question. Valid contract meets all essential requirements. It is legal and enforceable in a court of law. Verbal, also called a parole contract, doesn't meet the statutes of fraud, which means a contract needs to be in writing to be enforceable. Verbal agreements aren't enforceable. So you may get a test question. A verbal contract for the sale of a home is to be completed tomorrow in writing. Right now, the contract is what? Okay, good. Excellent. Looking for the key words, verbal. But wait, John, it says it's going to be completed tomorrow in writing. Has it been completed in writing yet? No, still a verbal. So right now, it's not tomorrow yet, but right now they're saying it's still unenforceable. Okay, very good. Awesome. All right, continuing on. I like this memory aid called Cold Ice. Cold Ice. This is what makes a contract valid. These are the required elements to make a contract valid. You got to have contractual capacity, which is legal age, sound mind. Okay. Got to have meeting of the minds or offer and acceptance, CO, offer and acceptance, signatures. It's got to be legal. Okay. The purpose has to be a legal contract. The real estate contract has to have a description or a legal description, an accurate legal description, not a mailing address, although it'll be on there. But for it to be a valid contract, you have to have a surveyed legal description. Okay. It's got to be in writing, according to the statutes of fraud. We just discussed that about verbals. And then consideration means you're exchanging a home for the value of the home with money. That's called valuable. If it's a good consideration, then it's a donation. It's humanitarian. Okay. So you want to know what your essential elements are to make a contract enforceable in a court of law. Cold ice, contractual capacity, offer and acceptance, legal or legality of object, description, legal description, in writing, and consideration. Okay. You want to know this. This is a good memory aid. You got another technique that your school taught you? Go with that. All right. A requirement of a valid purchase agreement is, and you got to read the question, a requirement for a valid legal or a valid purchase agreement. What's required out of these? Excellent. Yep. Offer and acceptance, part of your cold ice, right? Contractual capacity, offer and acceptance. Okay. You got to have signatures. Don't necessarily need earnest money or time is of the essence, but for a valid contract to be established in a court of law, be legally enforced, out of these four selections, you have to have offered acceptance. You have to have buyer signature and seller signature. Okay. Develop a system where you have memory aids that will trigger you when you come to test questions like this. Because when you come to a test question like this, what I do if I'm looking for something like this, I may go down on my scratch paper and write down my memory aid, cold ice, just to kind of, I'm going to do a little mental workout before I go in and start answering questions. Okay. All right. Contract performance. Two questions. Again, we're still staying in contracts. An assignor and an assignee. These are when contracts are assigned. You say, John, can you assign a contract? Yeah, absolutely you can. It's done every day. Let's take, for example, a lease. If I'm leasing property, right? I'm the tenant. I'm leasing I got a year contract, a year lease with the landlord. $1,500 a month. 6 months into my lease, all of a sudden, my job is not going good and I may be losing it. I need to move back home, whatever the case may be. I go to my landlord and say, hey, can I assign my lease? I get permission to assign the lease. You come along. You need a place. You like the place. I assign my lease to you. Okay. I'm the assignor. You're the assignee. Now, who's responsible for the lease? Is it you or me? Well, it's my lease that I assign to you. So you're under my lease that you're taking over. It's like assuming a loan for a house that you purchase. You're assigned my lease for the remaining 6 months. Then you're going to make out a new lease for yourself. But you're on my lease for the end of the year. So if you violate my lease, I still can be responsible. So you're primarily the responsible party, but I am also responsible if you can't fulfill my lease. The landlord can come back after me as the assignor. What's the only way that I can be completely eliminated of responsibility and liability? What's the term I'm looking for in contracts? Anybody know that term? You remember the term novation? Novation is a term that says I'm completely eliminated. In other words, you come in and you fill out a new contract. It's under your name. I didn't assign it. Novation means I am released of my liability of my contract. Okay. That term's called novation. It's a new contract. It substitutes an old one. So assignor, assignee. Okay. We're both still responsible. Okay. Now, when you sublease, I'm not assigning the whole unit. Remember, I'm moving out. I'm going home. You're taking over the whole 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay. Now, if I sublease, I'm going to say, hey, you know what, Mr. Landlord, I need help with this 1,500. I want to split it 750. So someone comes in and I a sublet or what's called a partial lease. In other words, I'm taking them in as a roommate. Okay. And we split it 750 a piece. So when I'm assigning a lease, all of it goes to you. Assign order, assignee, both responsible for the lease. Okay. If I'm going to sublease, that means I'm going to do a partial, or to subrogate, I'm going to do a partial lease where you're going to come in, or the individual will come in, and I'll rent out a bedroom, the kitchen, all that will be common areas. Okay. Know the difference between an assignment when it comes to a lease and what a sublease or a partial lease is. Okay. So 2 questions. Partial lease interest may be transferred by a lessee. This is a what? Okay. A partial lease is called a sublease. Okay. Very good. Now, the next question. Which of the following below is responsible for a lease that is assigned from a lessor to a lessee? Which of the following below is responsible for a lease that is assigned from the lessor to the lessee? Okay. Remember, let's go back and review real quick. Remember what we said about an assignment. I assign my lease to you. Who's responsible for that lease? You are as the primary, but I am also responsible for the lease because you assumed my lease. You took over my lease. So if you don't fulfill the obligation of that lease, like paying rent or damage the unit, then guess what? The landlord can come after me too. So we're both responsible. Okay. Although you're primary and I'm going to be on the backside of it, I'm still going to be held liable for your performance of the remaining of my lease. So the question is, which of the following below is responsible for a lease that is assigned from a lessor to a lessee? Both parties are. Okay. Both A and B, the lessor and the lessee, are responsible. Okay. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? We good? Everybody clear on this? All right. Let's talk about hazardous substance. I've got two questions out of this section. Now listen to me carefully. These three are the most selected, if I want to say, questions that come on the state exam. Lead-based paint, asbestos, and radon gas. Okay, these are the more popular questions. You may have some other small, and you got to go back and review your environmental section, but these are the three primary test questions that you're going to see. Okay, remember, lead-based paint is banned in 1978. Okay, any homes purchased before 1978, the buyer gets a lead-based paint pamphlet. It's a right-to-know pamphlet. Okay, you can download it on your desktop and shoot them the PDF document. If it's a house that they're going to purchase before 78, they have a right to read about lead-based paint because the seller must disclose a lead-based paint disclosure to the buyer saying this house was built before 78. Okay, that's lead-based paint. Asbestos, although a good material, it's fire retardant, it really only becomes critical if it's disturbed, right? But as long as it's not disturbed, it's really good because it's fire retardant. Now, it was also banned in 1978. It's got to be disposed by a licensed facility. You want to know that an alternative, they may ask you a question, what's an alternative method for mitigating asbestos? Okay, what's an alternative method? And it's called encapsulation. That actually happened to me. I listed a home that was built in 65, and the investor that bought it, there was asbestos in the tile they had, the original tile. pretty tile, real pretty tile. But there was about 10% by volume asbestos in the tile. And so the investor bought it as an investment property. And what they did, instead of removing it, all they did was put a polyurethane seal on it and then put the laminate floor on top of that. Okay, so they encapsulated the actual asbestos. Alternative method, recognize that on the state exam. Does not have to be abated, but has to be disclosed. Same thing with lead-based paint. Does not have to be abated, but must be disclosed. Again, 1978, before 1978. And in radon gas, colorless, odorless, tasteless, it's radioactive type gas in the substructure of the earth in rock formation that leaches to the surface, can go through the cracks of the foundation, get into a house. Abatements are required, but above certain levels. So this takes radon gas licensed people that are licensed to do radon gas testing. Okay. So be familiar with these three. So you got a couple of questions that I got. Colorless, odorless gas that can be carcinogenic is called what? Colorless, odorless gas. What's that called? Okay. We're talking about radon gas. Okay. Very good. Radon gas. Now, the next question is, a buyer is purchasing a home that was built in 1978. Which of the following below is true about lead-based paint? What do you think? Okay, I got a couple answers. A buyer is purchasing a home that was built in 1978. Which of the following below is true about lead-based paint? What do y'all think? I got two answers. Anybody else? All right, let's look at this. I do this question again. You got to think about how these test writers can appropriate this. Okay, I put these type questions in there because I want to condition you. I want to train you on this. Read the question again. A buyer is purchasing a home that was built in 1978. When was lead-based paint banned? In 1978. Okay. So what does the law say about lead-based paint? Before 1978. Okay. So the simple one word, in and not before, makes the difference of the answer. Because if it was built in 1978, there is no disclosure, nor is there a pamphlet that needs to be distributed. So it's none of the above. Y'all see this? Very important. I'm trying to condition you and train you on these test questions because this is the kind of things you're going to come across. Because listen, again, watch this. When you read these test questions, you're reading this, a buyer purchased a home that was built in 1978. 1978, you throw your hands up, you're going, oh, that's lead-based paint. I know all about it. I can teach this. I know all about lead-based paint. Absolutely, the buyer needs to give a lead-based paint right to know pamphlet. Absolutely, the seller has to provide a lead-based paint disclosure, both A and B. Let's go to the next question. And we didn't even realize the word in. Not before, but in. I can't tell you how critical this is when you're reading these questions. You got to slow down. You got to develop a system. Listen to me carefully. Develop a system to where you read the question at least twice and look for key words. These are key words. The word in. If it was built in 78, I don't need anything. Only before. Okay? So I do this part of training to condition you to learn how to take these and analyze these test questions a little better. Does that make sense? Is everybody on board with this? Okay. All right, discount points. Another calculation that you want to know how to do in finance. Discount points, very important. Remember, it's the loan amount. You're taking the amount of points. 1 point equals 1%, 2 points, 2%, so on. And so the formula is nothing more than the cost of the points equals the loan amount times the number of points. So $100,000 loan, 2 points, 2% of $100,000, $2,000 is the cost of the loan. Okay. That's how you calculate that. Okay. Now, let's read the question. Go ahead and see if you can work this problem out. A home sold for $142,000. The lender demanded that the buyer pay 1.75 points for an 80% loan. What amount did the buyer pay in points? What do you think? What do you think? All right. So let's go and work this out. Okay. A home sold for $142,000. Lender demanded that the buyer pay 1.75 points for 80%. Okay. Now, the basic formula, number of points, 1.75 points is 1.75% or 0.0175. But we don't multiply it times 142 because that's the price of the home. We multiply it by 80% of 142 because that's the loan amount. Okay. So if I take 142,000 times 80%, I get 113,600. That's the amount I'm borrowing That's the amount the 1.75 points applies to. So that's going to be times 0.0175, and I get $1,988. Okay. Don't forget, again, this is one of these test questions where a home sold for 142. Typically, many people will go straight to 142 times 1.75, and they'll have that answer down, which is 2485. So they don't, again, it's like one of the lead-based paint we just read. They look at that as the price times the amount of points, and they don't register, I need a loan amount, not the price of the home. Okay. Why didn't they just put the loan amount in there? Because they want to see if you understand how to get the loan amount and understand the principle of points being the loan amount. Okay. All right. All right, here we go. Does a bank ever run out of money? Somebody answer that. Does a bank ever run out of money? Okay. I got one yes. I got a maybe. I got another yes. Let me ask you this. Can you drive from California to New York City on one tank of gas? Answer is no. You got to refill up, right? You got to get more gas. Same thing with a bank. Here's the basic concept. When a bank lends out home loan money, they're lending out capital they have, right? Presently have capital in their inventory they lend out. That's called intermediation. I got a lot of money. I'm full of gas, full of money. I'm going to lend it out. Now my capital decreases. I'm in a disintermediation state. My gas tank's empty. I got to find a way to get more gas. I got to find a way to get more money. So the bank has to come up with a way to get more money. One of the ways they do it is they go to the secondary market. Okay.
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.
The primary market is where they create loans. Remember, you want to know what intermediation is. That's the flow of funds that are available. Disintermediation means the capital is tied up and they don't have money to lend out. So they go to the secondary market. What do, John? They take the loans on hand, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of home loans that they have. They'll sell them to Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, or Freddie Mac. They buy the loans. They're called warehousing agencies, where they take the loans and they'll service them out for the term of life. Now the banks have money back to lend out more money, all right, to home loans. Then they'll get to a disintermediation state, and they'll sell the loans again to the secondary market. So the secondary market is only purpose is to buy loans from the primary market. You don't go to Fannie Mae and borrow money. You go to Chase Bank and borrow money. They'll take your loan and sell it to Fannie Mae so they can get more money to lend out to your friend. Okay. That's called the primary market and the secondary market. Now, in the secondary market, Fannie Mae buys and sells conventional, FHA, and VA, all three loans. They buy them all from the primary market. Ginnie Mae is strictly government. Okay. And then Freddie Mac only buys conventional loans. They don't mess with government loans. Okay. So you may get a question that reads, secondary financing refers to what? Okay. Good, Sharon. Remember, anytime you see the word primary market, secondary financing, you have to go back and vision this. This is what you need to create. This is what needs to be in your mind when you start talking about the primary and secondary market. You need to see this. If you can see this and understand this financial concept, that's 90% of the mortgage industry that we deal with in real estate. Okay. Now, you're not going to need to know this when you get in real life, right? Because we have lenders that take care of all that for your clients. But for your test and for the fact that you can educate and create value for your clients, you want to picture this: the bank full of money, maybe perhaps they sold a lot of loans, an LOT, not a lot, but a lot, meaning a bundle. Maybe it was worth, 100 million worth of loans sold to Fannie Mae. Now they've got 100 million back, and they're going to turn around and set and make more loans out. The fact that they sold the loans and they got the flow of capital in their presence is called intermediation. Full tank of gas. Now here comes along the guy leaning against his house with the money bag, wants to borrow from the bank. Okay, and you times that 10, 15, 20,000 people, now your bank's going to have a disintermediation standpoint to where there's no more money left. It's tied up in loans. We're only collecting monthly principal and interest, or monthly P&I. So now as a bank, we need to sell more loans. Well, we don't have the money. Well, let's take some loans we got, the bundle of loans we got, again, 100, however many, 10, 15 million, whatever it is, we're going to sell it to Fannie Mae and reclaim that money, turn around and lend it out. Say, well, John, what's the purpose of that? Why not just accept the loans in full payment? Because all the money's made up front. Let me show you. I did this calculation. I know it by heart. Numbers may have changed, but let me just give you an example. Estimate 5,000 Chase banks in the United States, branch offices. Let's say out of 5,000 branches, all of them, let's say they average 10 loans, 5,000 times 10 loans a month. 50,000 loans are made a month in this example. Okay, I'm not saying these are real numbers. This is an example. 5,000 branches, they do 10 loans a month, 5,000 branches. That's 50,000 loans are made out per month. Now, let's just do the origination fee at 1% times 0.0. Let's see here. 0.01. Okay, so we got 5,000 banks times 10 loans a month, 50,000 times 0.01. So we got, wait, I got that wrong. Hold on one second. 5,000 banks times 10 loans. So we got 50,000 loans going out. I forgot to put a price to it. So let's say, I'm just going to use the easy number. Let's say each of these loans, 50,000 per month that go out. Let's say each of these loans are 100,000. Okay. And then I'm going to go times 0.01, which is 1% origination fee. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 50 million in 1% origination loans. If there's 5,000 banks doing 10 loans a month at $100,000, tens of millions of dollars are made up front just in origination fees. Forget discount points and all that other stuff. And I think it's more than 1%. I was just using basic numbers. My whole point is, do they want to sit on these loans for 30 years and collect the interest? Or would they rather turn around and sell it to the secondary market, take all that money, lend it out again, and make up because they get that money right away. That finance charge is on the CD. Okay. It's on the closing disclosure form. So the buyer's got to pay those finance charges up front. So the whole point of the primary market and the secondary market, primary market is where loans are originated. Secondary market is where they're bought. Now, the secondary market does sell some of their loans to private investors as mortgage-backed securities to reclaim money to turn around and buy from the primary market again. Okay. But here's the picture you want to understand when it comes to financing home loans from the primary market to the secondary market. Okay. And again, the primary market consists of savings associations. That's what SA is. Commercial banks, credit union. That's where loans are originated. Intermediation means they got money to lend out. Disintermediation means they don't. This is where they go to the secondary market, Fannie Mae, Ginnie Mae, and Freddie Mac, okay, to sell their loans, to recoup, to lend money back out, okay? And so when you're looking at the secondary financing or secondary market, remember, secondary financing doesn't mean a second loan or a second mortgage. They're talking about markets, the marketplace, primary market meaning where money is lent, loans are originated, secondary market is where they're bought, okay, from the primary market. So a secondary financing is going to refer to the sale of an existing loan into a secondary market, okay? So we're looking at answer B, okay? Rest your eyes. You really want to become familiar with this concept here because there's a lot of questions they can ask. And, you know, interesting enough, we talked about the secondary market, but these banks that get to a disintermediation state can actually go to the Federal Reserve district banks. In the United States, there's 12 district banks the Federal Reserve has, and these banks can borrow from these federal district banks at low interest rates, and then turn them around and sell the loans at market value interest rates. That's called discounting. And the difference between what they buy and sell it at is called arbitration. Okay, arbitration. We borrowed from the Federal Reserve, say at 0.75%, we're turning around and lending it out at 6%. That difference is called arbitration, and it's called discounting. And they can borrow, again, bundles of loans from the Federal Reserve. They can sell some loans to the secondary market, and also they can capture from their client base product lines they sell, like CDs, open and savings accounts. So they get money from the public that has accounts there too. So there's a couple of sources of income that these banks can get to be able to lend out for home loans. Okay.
For more practice questions, videos, and insight into the state exam, we encourage you to join our free webinar, How to Pass the Real Estate Exam Without Your Real Estate Book and with only 15 to 20 hours of study time. Get registered now at myrealestatetutor.com/exam.